was 35 years old the morning my stepbrother walked into a boardroom carrying paperwork to fire me from a company he thought he owned. The funny thing? The company had legally belonged to me for almost 4 years. But that part comes later, because this story really started 9 years earlier on a rainy Thursday, when my father looked me in the eye and told me something I'll never forget. "You're strong enough to handle it." Those 6 words cost me everything. At least that's what I thought at the time. My name is Ethan Walker, and for most of my life, I was the backup plan, the dependable son, the responsible one, the kid who never caused problems. My stepbrother Brandon was different. Brandon needed attention, needed rescue, needed excuses, and somehow the entire family reorganized itself around his needs. If Brandon crashed a car, people worried about Brandon. If I worked overtime to help pay household bills, nobody noticed. That's just how things worked. And when you've lived inside a system long enough, you stop questioning it. You call it normal. Until one day, something breaks. For me, that day came when I was 26. My father owned a small manufacturing company outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing glamorous, just a family business making industrial components. I had worked there since high school, sweeping floors, loading trucks, learning every department. I believed one day I'd help run it, not because I expected a handout, because I'd earned it. Then Dad got sick, very sick, cancer, the kind that changes the atmosphere of every room. Suddenly, everyone was talking about succession plans, future ownership, leadership. And that's when I discovered something. Brandon had been promised everything, despite barely working there, despite showing up late, despite treating the company like a personal ATM. Dad sat me down one evening in the hospital. I still remember the smell of disinfectant, the sound of monitors, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. He said Brandon wasn't ready. He said Brandon needed stability, needed support, needed the company more than I did. Then came the sentence, "You're strong enough to handle it." I nodded, but something inside me quietly died. A month later, I left. Not dramatically. No argument, no scene. I packed my apartment, accepted a job offer in Texas, and disappeared. Nobody stopped me. That hurt more than the inheritance. For the first year, I was angry. For the second year, I was exhausted. By the third year, I was too busy building a new life to keep score. I worked 70-hour weeks, saved every dollar, learned everything I could about operations and logistics. While Brandon was posting vacation photos online, I was studying balance sheets at midnight. One day became another, then another. Success didn't arrive all at once. It arrived disguised as boring consistency, a promotion, a raise, a better opportunity, then another. By 31, I was running regional operations for a national company. By 32, I launched my own consulting business. By 33, things got interesting. A retired businessman named Harold Benson became my mentor. Harold had built and sold multiple manufacturing companies. He liked my work ethic. More importantly, he liked that I never asked him for anything. One afternoon, he invited me to lunch. Halfway through dessert, he asked a question. "If someone handed you a manufacturing company tomorrow, could you run it?" I laughed, then realized he wasn't joking. 6 months later, Harold sold me a controlling stake in one of his businesses through a structured ownership agreement. Most people thought I got lucky. What they didn't see were the thousands of hours that made me ready when luck finally showed up. Then came the phone call. The first one in years. My father had passed away. I flew home for the funeral, and that's where I saw Brandon again. He looked older, more tired, more entitled, somehow all at once. At the reception, he cornered me, started talking about the company, the family business, his company, his inheritance, his future. The funny thing, the company wasn't doing well. Brandon had nearly run it into the ground. Debt, lost clients, bad decisions. I listened politely, then flew back to Texas. 3 months later, I received another call, this time from one of the company's major suppliers, someone I'd known years earlier. The business was collapsing. Employees were leaving. Banks were getting nervous. Brandon needed investors, fast. Guess who he contacted? Me. Apparently, I was successful enough to help now. Strong enough, useful enough. Interesting how that works. We met in a conference room. He arrived with spreadsheets, projections, excuses, everything except accountability. He wanted money, lots of it. I listened, then made a proposal. I would invest, but only for controlling ownership. Brandon laughed. Actually laughed. He thought I was desperate, thought family loyalty would make me write a check with no strings attached. I thanked him for his time and walked away. 6 months later, the bank took control. Guess who bought the company assets? Not Brandon. Me. Quietly, legally, completely. I didn't buy revenge. I bought an opportunity. Most employees stayed. Clients returned. The company recovered. And for 4 years, I rebuilt the business my father had once chosen to give away. Then came the board meeting, the one that started this story. Brandon had somehow convinced himself he still deserved ownership, still deserved power, still deserved control. He arrived carrying paperwork prepared by a lawyer. His plan? Remove me, take over leadership, reclaim what he called his company. There were 12 people in that room, investors, executives, attorneys, witnesses. He stood up, gave a speech, talked about family legacy, talked about fairness, talked about what Dad would have wanted. Then he finished and looked at me, waiting, confident, certain. I remember feeling strangely calm. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were ownership records, voting shares, acquisition agreements, every legal document. The attorney beside me smiled slightly, then explained the situation. Brandon owned nothing, not 10%, not 1%, nothing. The room went silent. His face changed, the same way a building changes right before it collapses. Confusion, denial, fear, then anger. A lot of anger. He accused me of betrayal, greed, manipulation, the usual things people say when reality finally arrives. I waited until he finished. Then I said something I'd carried for 9 years. You always got chosen because everyone thought you needed help. I paused. Nobody realized being overlooked was the best thing that ever happened to me. The room stayed silent because everyone knew it was true. Had Dad handed me that company at 26, I might never have become the person capable of rebuilding it. Sometimes rejection isn't a closed door. Sometimes it's an unwanted map. Brandon left. The meeting ended, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I stopped wondering whether my father had made the right choice. Because it didn't matter anymore. The company was healthy, the employees were thriving, and the man who had once been told he was strong enough to go without had finally built something nobody could take away. That's the thing about being overlooked. If you're lucky, it teaches you to stop waiting for permission. And once you stop waiting, your life can begin.